Welcome, dear listeners, to the Softly Spoken Science Podcast. I'm your host, the Softly Spoken Science Nerd, bringing you bedtime stories calculated to raise your knowledge level. This podcast is dedicated to the belief that a good calm science talk will put you right to sleep. If you feel like this might be the case, hit like and subscribe now, and tap the little bell to be notified about the next video. Then make yourself comfortable, and let's drift away. Tonight we are returning to the Dinosaur Society's Dinosaur Encyclopedia by Don Lessem and Donald Glut. It was one of the most comprehensive mass-market dinosaur books of the 1990s. This was the era of the first two Jurassic Park films, just after we knew dinosaurs were warm-blooded, just before we knew they had feathers. Let's see how it holds up. This book is organized alphabetically. Last time we reviewed from Alacodon to Azendosaurus. Tonight we will review from Bactrosaurus to Ceratosaurus. Bactrosaurus johnsoni. Bactrosaurus is the oldest known member of the true Lambeosaurines, the hollow-crested and more solidly built than the crestless Hadrosaurine subfamily of duckbills. This browser was more massive and more powerful than its contemporary from the Hadrosaurine subfamily of duckbills, Gilmoriosaurus. Bactrosaurus bears a superficial resemblance to the Iguanodontids, earlier plant eaters, and is among the most primitive of the duckbills. Bactrosaurus was discovered in Inner Mongolia in 1923 by scientists who were part of the American Museum of Natural History's expedition to the Gobi Desert. The age of the Gobi sediments in which Bactrosaurus was found is not yet established, but Bactrosaurus has long been ascribed to the early part of the late Cretaceous period. Since Bactrosaurus was more primitive than the duckbills already known from western North America, its discovery supports the expedition leader's theory that Asian dinosaurs crossed into North America via now submerged land connections during the late Cretaceous. While dinosaurs did move between these continents, it is not clear whether Asian dinosaurs were the ancestors of those found in North America or vice versa. No, Bactrosaurus is a hadrosaur that looks like an iguanodontid. Creationists, as I was growing up, deny evolution. The only way to deny evolution is to misunderstand it, and the only way to misunderstand it is to prevent understanding, and the only way to justify that is to invest in denial. Evolutionary scientists, as I became, review all the forensic evidence and recognize beyond any reasonable doubt that hadrosaurs are related to iguanodonts, and iguanodonts are related to Camptosaurus, while Camptosaurus is related to Dryosaurus and Hypsilophodon. Evolutionary scientists debate where to draw lines between species, genera, and families, but such debates are artificial and misleading to the public, because species, families, and genera are artificial categories that reflect the outdated paradigms of the 18th and 19th centuries more than they reflect what we now know about biology. Nothing in biology makes sense except in light of evolution, and therefore creationists can never let anything in biology make sense. The only thing they can do with a series of transitional fossils is draw arbitrary lines between them and insist that any apparent evolutionary relationships are only coincidences. Creationists are on a mission to lump all dinosaur diversity into as few kinds as possible. They are solving a biblical calculus problem. The Bible says 2 of every kind of land animal had to fit on Noah's Ark, and they believe that included dinosaurs. So they have to solve for the fewest different kinds of dinosaurs they can possibly imagine to preserve the veneer of plausibility around the Ark story. The fewer dinosaurs you have to imagine walking onto the same boat together, the easier the story is to swallow. When I believed this story, I thought Noah would only need one stall for 2 hadrosaurs. They could be subadults and maybe the size of horses or rhinos. My question was only whether there was a stall for Iguanodon too, or whether iguanodonts were covered under hadrosaurs. Of course, it is a problem for creationism that late Cretaceous hadrosaurs and early Cretaceous iguanodonts are never found in the same rocks together. Creationists think they all lived at the same time, only occupying different ecological niches in different areas of land. Noah's flood, according to account, was worldwide, the most vigorous flood in all history, and yet the carcasses of early Cretaceous iguanodonts and late Cretaceous hadrosaurs are always perfectly sorted by rock layers and by time periods, with never a mixed assemblage. Obviously, if there really was a worldwide flood, fossils from many different ecosystems would be mixed together in the same rocks, in the same mass graves, and such mixtures would be common on every continent. Hadrosaurs and iguanodonts did not occupy different niches in different locations during the same time period. In fact, they occupied the same locations and same niches at different time periods. In order to be a creationist, you really cannot learn too much, and the time that you are learning, your main focus is reverse engineering facts to agree with the Bible. Bagaceratops rozhdestvenskyi. Bagaceratops was a small and primitive horned dinosaur with a short frill over its neck, which may have been laced with openings. Its snout was short and had a small nose horn. Bagaceratops most closely resembles Leptoceratops gracilis, though its nose horn and frill are larger, and Microceratops gobiensis. Skulls of this dinosaur were discovered in the Gobi Desert of Mongolia in an expedition led by Polish women scientists. Bahariasaurus ingens. This poorly known large carnivore may have been smaller than Albertosaurus, but some of its backbones were twice as long. It was apparently a powerfully built animal. Bahariasaurus' relationship to other carnivorous dinosaurs is unclear. Bahariasaurus, like the giant sail-backed carnivore Spinosaurus, was brought to Stuttgart by its German collectors. Unfortunately, until more specimens are found, we cannot understand much about Bahariasaurus or Spinosaurus, as their namesake specimens were destroyed in 1944 by bombs. Barapasaurus tagorei. Barapasaurus was a large browser with spoon-shaped teeth and relatively slender limbs. It may be one of the earliest sauropods, though some scientists consider it a prosauropod. Parts of more than 300 of these mysterious animals have been found in the Godavari Valley of southern India. But how Barapasaurus looked and what it was remains uncertain. No skulls or feet have been found, and the proportions of the limbs are uncertain. Barapasaurus was an early sauropod of the Vulcanodontid family. Vulcanodonts were different from the later diplodocids, brachiosaurs, camarasaurs, cetiosaurs, and titanosaurs we have already touched on. Creationists, needing to condense dinosaur diversity down to the size of Noah's Ark, the need to condense sauropods is especially acute, both because sauropods are so large and because there are so many kinds of them, and because their common ancestry is so obvious. Barosaurus lentus. Barosaurus is a relatively rare sauropod, a longer-necked close relative of the whip-tailed giant Diplodocus. Barosaurus' tail was shorter than that of Diplodocus, and its hind limbs stockier. The cast of a Barosaurus rearing up on its hind legs to defend its young from an Allosaurus stands in the rotunda of the American Museum of Natural History in New York City. It is, at more than 50 feet high, the tallest dinosaur display in the world. In life, it is questionable whether Barosaurus could adopt such a dramatic pose. Barosaurus was the first dinosaur found in the Black Hills of South Dakota. It was named in 1980 by the most prolific namer of dinosaurs, Yale scientist Othniel Charles Marsh. It has also been discovered in Wyoming and western Colorado. Barosaurus gracilis. From limited evidence, this species appears to have been a large sauropod much like Barosaurus lentus. It was named from isolated limb bones found in Tanzania in 1908. Barsboldia sicinskii. This big duck-billed dinosaur was found in Mongolia in the late 1960s. It is one of the hollow-crested duckbills, and it is among the largest of the lambeosaurines. The high spines on its backbone and other characteristics of Barsboldia's skeleton more closely resemble Hypacrosaurus of North America than they do other Asian duckbills. Perhaps Barsboldia had a humped back or a slight fin. As yet, it is very poorly known and questionable as a valid name, since it was named from a single incomplete specimen. Baryonyx walkeri. Nicknamed Claws, Baryonyx was a large, unusual meat-eater. Perhaps its most distinctive characteristics were its long crocodile-like snout with many teeth and its enormous talons nearly 1 foot long. The first fossil of Baryonyx, one of its claws, was discovered in a British clay pit in January 1983 by an amateur collector. British Natural History Museum scientists excavated a nearly complete skeleton at the site, the first carnivorous dinosaur ever found in England from any time, and the first from the Lower Cretaceous period anywhere in the world. Baryonyx's long snout and abundant teeth suggest it was a fish-eater, perhaps crouching on riverbanks to snap up its prey. Its enormous claw is shaped much like that of Allosaurus, though it is considerably larger. It is not certain whether the claw belongs to the hand or foot of Baryonyx. If it was a hand claw, it would have been held clear of the ground and may have been used to spear fish, like a grizzly bear. Baryonyx is a fascinating and famous animal today. Creationist thought leaders, having very limited awareness of any dinosaur less famous than Baryonyx, have long connected it with the medieval legend of St. George slaying a dragon. Certainly, Baryonyx was large enough of a predator that it could have been a Beowulf-level antagonist and bedeviled a small community of medieval humans, and certainly you might have been able to kill it with medieval weapons if you were very lucky. But in order to get Baryonyx in the same time period as human gladiators, first creationism has to be true. And if creationism is true, then Baryonyx is the same animal as Spinosaurus. Becklespinax altispinax. All we know of Becklespinax are three massive, linked, and unusually tall vertebrae with very high spines that were discovered in Battle near Hastings in East Sussex, England, during the early 1850s by Samuel H. Beckles. Becklespinax's spines most closely match those in the South American carnivore Piatnitskisaurus. These spines may have given this theropod a humpbacked or fin-backed appearance. Becklespinax was originally described by Sir Richard Owen, the scientist who coined the name dinosaur in 1842. Owen considered Becklespinax to be an example of another predator, the first dinosaur named, Megalosaurus bucklandi. Sir Richard Owen is the reason why scientists assumed for a century that dinosaurs were slow, unfit lizards and not highly evolved proto-birds that would have made short work of most mammals, then and now. Whenever dinosaur footprints were found, Sir Richard insisted they were made by giant birds, not reptiles. He rejected Darwin's theory all the way to his death in 1892, because on his limited information at the time, the fact that birds derived from reptiles was not very apparent. Bellusaurus sui. Bellusaurus was a small four-legged browser with spoon-shaped teeth. Its short forelimbs suggest it may belong to the Cetiosaur sauropods. Skull fossils are very rare for any sauropods, animals with small and light heads. But Chinese scientists in Xinjiang, in far northwestern China, discovered the lightly built skull of Bellusaurus, which features nostrils set on the side of the head. The animal's neck was short for a sauropod, yet longer than its trunk. Betasuchus bredai. Betasuchus is an old historical name for a poorly known carnivorous dinosaur. The animal was originally described by British scientist Harry Govier-Seeley as a species of Megalosaurus. Its description was based on a single incomplete leg bone found in the famous Maastricht fossil pits of the Netherlands, the site of the first scientifically identified fossils. German dinosaur paleontologist Friedrich von Hoyne identified the specimen as a Coelurosaur, a small predator he originally named Ornithomimodorum genus B. He later gave it a new generic name, Betasuchus. The one known bone of Betasuchus, its femur, closely resembles that in both Elaphrosaurus and Sarcosaurus. It may, as von Hoyne thought, have been an ornithomimid, or an ostrich-mimic dinosaur, the only one known from Europe. The bone is in too poor condition for any kind of positive classification, so Betasuchus' status as a valid dinosaur name is in doubt. Bihariosaurus bauxiticus. A primitive member of the Iguanodontid family, Bihariosaurus may have evolved from Camptosaurus, a bulky plant-eater known from both western North America and western Europe. Bihariosaurus is known only from some teeth and bones found in a bauxite mine in Romania in 1978. It has not yet been scientifically described. Blikanasaurus cromptoni. Blikanasaurus was a stoutly built prosauropod, one of the early dinosaurian plant-eaters. Most prosauropods were capable of walking either on four legs or just their hind limbs, but the heavy-legged Blikanasaurus may have walked only on fours. Some paleontologists have suggested that Blikanasaurus may be more closely related to the sauropods, the four-legged giant plant-eaters of later times, than other prosauropods. So, Blikanasaurus is a prosauropod that resembles a sauropod. That makes sense in the light of evolution. In the dark of creationism, it becomes a bit of a mystery. Borogovia gracilicrus. Borogovia was a medium-sized member of the troodontid family, small, nimble, and unusually large-brained dinosaurs. It appears to have been long-legged, as it has the longest shin bones known for these dinosaurs, at least 280 millimeters long. In other known troodontids, the second digit is strongly curved, with a toe equipped with a sharp claw, and carried off the ground. This toe was used as a weapon. Although the second toe of Borogovia touched the ground, the sharpness of its bone indicates that it too may have functioned as a weapon. Borogovia was identified in 1993 as a troodontid. Let's just say there's been a lot to update about troodontids since 1993. We'll come back to that in a later episode. Bahariasaurus suffosus. In 1875, Sir Richard Owen, the scientist who coined the term dinosaur, described this long-legged, long-toothed, bulky sauropod from the backbones in its hip region. At the time, Bahariasaurus was the only dinosaur known to have large openings in its backbones, hence its name. That feature is now known to be common to many sauropod dinosaurs. The hind legs of Bahariasaurus were nearly equal in length to those in the front, and its overall appearance resembled the sauropod Camarasaurus, well known from North American late Jurassic sediments. This dinosaur was once known by the dubious name of Marmarospondylus. Well, Bahariasaurus was a brachiosaur that resembled a camarasaur. That makes sense in light of evolution, because brachiosaurs and camarasaurs are related. They are two related groups of sauropods that have a common ancestor. Together with titanosaurs, they form a group called Macronaria. Of course, it's easy to see that Brachiosaurus and Camarasaurus had a common ancestor. Because their common ancestry is so obvious, and because Noah's Ark is not big enough for the two of them, creationists are forced to perceive them as the same kind. In other words, the only way they can deny evolution is to affirm a parody of it. Just how many kinds of long-necked, four-legged behemoths did God create in the first place? Were there 2 sauropods on Noah's Ark or 10? Creationists do not doubt the ability of God to evolve diverse sauropods from a single common ancestor in just 1,000 years. Their only doubt is that nature is capable of doing the same in thousands of years. Creationist thought leaders tell church congregations that if Genesis isn't true, neither is anything else in the Bible. There may be something to that, but it is a simple fact that many of the most influential evolutionary scientists have been Christian believers, including all of my undergraduate geology teachers. It takes thousands of generations to produce new species as different from each other as Camarasaurus and Diplodocus. It took only hundreds of generations to produce domestic dogs and cats from their ancestors, because humans have been intentionally breeding them, with only a couple of years required between generations. Dinosaurs lived lifespans closer to human beings. Their generations took 20 years or more. Between the creation and the flood, for humans and dinosaurs, there were, at most, 80 to 100 generations. You see, the only way creationists can deny evolution is to believe it on steroids. Brachiosaurus altithorax. The giraffe-like Brachiosaurus, standing up to 52 feet high, is one of the best known of all the giant sauropod browsers. The biggest land animal known from nearly complete remains, it is the rarest of all the large sauropods found in the Morrison Formation of the American West. Brachiosaurus was first collected in 1900 in Fruita, Colorado, by Elmer G. Riggs, and was displayed for half a century at the Field Museum in Chicago. Riggs recognized that this immense big-chested animal was not only a new genus of dinosaur, but also the member of a previously unknown family of sauropods, the Brachiosauridae. More information on Brachiosaurus came with the discovery of spectacularly complete material in the early 20th century in Tanzania. These remains are the basis for a second named species, Brachiosaurus branchi. Since 1993, that's been reclassified Giraffatitan branchi. The African remains showed that Brachiosaurus' skull was similar to that of its relative Camarasaurus, stout, with strong jaws and large chisel-shaped teeth. Its most unusual skull feature was a flat snout with enormous nasal openings at the front of the skull. These were viewed as snorkels by those who thought sauropods were swimmers. However, recent studies indicate that a large sauropod could not have lived long partially submerged in water. Scientists now see Brachiosaurus as a landlubber and a treetop browser. The high-placed nostrils may have been covered by a fleshy chamber that amplified sound. The placement and structure of the nostrils may also have served to increase the sense of smell, or perhaps they functioned as a cooling surface for the blood. Though at home on land, Brachiosaurus was probably not a nimble runner, for it had small, narrow feet for its size, and short hind legs. The first digit of the front foot had a claw, and the hind foot had large claws on the first 3 digits. The function of the claws is unknown. They may have been used for raking plants, or in defense. Brachiosaurus was adept at getting food from the forest canopy. Fossils indicate that it could hold its long neck high and maneuver it well. Muscle scars on the neck ribs indicate that these bones accommodated large muscles. The cervical vertebrae have a ball and socket design, which gave the neck strength and flexibility. Brachiosaurus is also distinguished by its lightly built and undivided back vertebrae, unusually long chest ribs, and slender upper arm, which measures about 2.04 meters long. What may be the biggest of all known dinosaurs, the giant Ultrasaurus discovered by dinosaur Jim Jensen, will come back to Ultrasaurus at the end of the book. Brachiosaurus branchi. This species is based on the remains of a number of individuals discovered in Tendaguru, Tanzania. A composite skeleton, the largest mounted dinosaur skeleton in the world, of Brachiosaurus branchi, is on display in the Humboldt Museum für Naturkunde in Berlin. This skeleton measures some 22.5 meters long and 12 meters tall, although there are bones in the museum collection belonging to an even larger individual. Brachiosaurus branchi may represent a different genus. The structure of the vertebrae of its back, and perhaps its shoulder, differ somewhat from Brachiosaurus altithorax. Bacaceratops montanensis. Bacaceratops was a small-horned dinosaur with diminutive brow horns and a slight upward curve on its nose horn. Its frill had a scalloped border and a relatively sharp crest in the middle, an area perhaps pierced with small openings. This dinosaur was first collected in 1913 in Glacier County, Montana by Charles Whitney Gilmore of the Smithsonian Institution. 5 small Bacaceratops were found near an adult dinosaur nearly twice their size, suggesting this may have been a family of young horned dinosaurs cared for by a parent. Brachylophosaurus canadensis. This primitive late duckbill had a low, solid crest with a short spike that pointed backward between its eyes. This prominent nasal spike may have been used in head pushing during contests between Brachylophosaurs. Brachylophosaurus had long forelimbs for a duckbill. It was first believed to be a new species of Gryposaurus, but further studies showed it was a new genus, distinguished by a relatively high skull and paddle-shaped crest. Brachylophosaurus goodwini. This dinosaur was discovered in Montana in 1981. The skull, which has depressions in the front, differs only slightly from Brachylophosaurus canadensis. The differences may be only sexual in nature. If so, Brachylophosaurus goodwini may be reclassified as the same species of Brachylophosaurus canadensis. Brachypodosaurus gravis. Brachypodosaurus was a short, stoutly built dinosaur that may have been an ankylosaur, or perhaps related to the stegosaurs. The type specimen, which consists only of a lower leg bone, does not permit a sure identification. Bradykiniemi draculae. This little-known small carnivore represents one of the most stupendous misnamings in paleontology. 2 British scientists thought that the tip of a shin bone collected in Transylvania in 1923 by Lady Smith Woodward belonged to a new family of giant owls. Its species name honors Count Dracula of Transylvania. Brontosaurus. Invalid name. See Apatosaurus. Well, as we've already discussed with Apatosaurus, Brontosaurus is valid again. St. Ignatius collinsi. St. Ignatius was a slightly built carnivore. Some paleontologists thought it was identical to another small meat-eater from the same time in Canada, Chirostenotes. However, current scientific thinking is that St. Ignatius is a more primitive dinosaur belonging to its own family. Since it is known only from its lower jaws, deducing its identity is particularly difficult. Calamasaurus foxy. Calamasaurus was a small early meat-eater, too poorly known for any definitive assignment to a particular family. It was named on the basis of two neck vertebrae and a lower leg bone found more than a century ago on the Isle of Wight, where many British dinosaurs have been found. Calamasaurus may be the same animal as Calamaspondylus. Calamaspondylus owenii. Another small meat-eater of uncertain identity, Calamaspondylus is known from incomplete fossil remains found on the Isle of Wight. Among the few facts known about this dinosaur is that its toes were small. The claws of its hands, however, were relatively large. An unusual feature of this dinosaur is its pubic bone. The so-called foot of this bone seems to be much longer than that of most other meat-eaters, suggesting that Calamaspondylus had a bigger stomach region. Callovasaurus leedsii. Although known only from an upper leg bone, Callovasaurus is an important dinosaur because it marks the earliest known occurrence of the Iguanodontia, a group of large two-legged plant eaters to which all iguanodonts and duck-billed dinosaurs belong. When remains of this dinosaur were discovered, they were first thought to belong to a new species of Camptosaurus, leedsii, then to another dinosaur, Dryosaurus. Not until 1980 was Callovasaurus recognized as a new kind of dinosaur. Callovasaurus is an iguanodont that resembles Camptosaurus. This makes sense in the light of evolution. In the dark of creationism, it gets mysterious. Camarasaurus supremus. Camarasaurus is the best-known large four-legged browser, or sauropod, from North America, and the most abundant of fossils. Its head was short, box-like, and strongly constructed, with large nostrils set above the snout area and in front of the eyes. The head was held at a distinct angle to the neck, which was shorter and thicker than that of most sauropods. The forelimbs and hind legs of Camarasaurus were approximately the same length, making its back almost horizontal. Its front legs were more robust than those of Diplodocus, more slender than Apatosaurus, and relatively long. Its tail was short and somewhat flat, and certainly not the whiplash found on some large sauropods such as Diplodocus and Apatosaurus. A wealth of Camarasaurus remains have been discovered over the years, much of which has come from immature material, much of which has come from immature individuals. This has prompted some authors to state, incorrectly, that Camarasaurus was small for a sauropod. Adults, however, were quite large, almost as big as Apatosaurus. Recently discovered hatchling specimens indicate that these sauropods, like other dinosaurs, laid eggs and did not give birth to live young. Camarasaurus agilis. Doubtful name. This fragmentary find appears to be a cetiosaurid of some sort. Camarasaurus alenguarensis. Doubtful name. This species was originally referred to as Apatosaurus and is based on a skeleton without a head found in Portugal. Camarasaurus grandis. The smallest known species of Camarasaurus, only 7.5 meters long. It had unusually large hind feet, slender toes, and a very large first toe. It was originally thought to be a new species of its contemporary sauropod, Apatosaurus. Camarasaurus lentus. This is a subadult which has more massive, shorter vertebrae and shorter legs than the smaller Camarasaurus grandis. The most complete sauropod skeleton yet found is that of an immature Camarasaurus lentus collected at Dinosaur National Monument in Utah. This skeleton shows the animal in its death pose, with the neck arched back by a constriction of its muscles. A thin layer of carbon found beside the skeleton could be a rare instance of preserved sauropod skin. Camelotia borealis. Not much is known of this genus. It is a large member of the melanosaurids, a family of small-headed, large-bodied early plant-eaters called prosauropods. It is a large member of the melanosaurids, a family of small-headed, large-bodied early plant-eating prosauropods. Only recently recognized as a new kind of dinosaur, Camelotia had previously been referred to Avalania, Picrodon, and Gracilicrus. Camptonotus. Invalid. See Camptosaurus. Camptosaurus dispar. This bulky plant eater resembled the more advanced herbivore Iguanodon. However, Camptosaurus had a more primitive hand and a first finger that had a short, rather than a sizable, spike, like Iguanodon. Also, The ends of its second and third fingers were more curved and less hoof-like than iguanodonts. Camptosaurus had heavy hind limbs and short forelimbs, suggesting that it may have moved on 2 legs. Its large bony wrist, however, indicates that it could also walk on all fours, probably for browsing on low vegetation. Since this dinosaur's discovery, much Camptosaurus material has been recovered, mostly from Wyoming. Some of these specimens exhibit great individual variation and various growth stages, making this dinosaur particularly well understood. Camptosaurus is significant as an intermediate animal. It is more advanced than the smaller plant eaters, the hypsilophodontids, yet more primitive than the later hadrosaurs, the duck-billed dinosaurs. Camptosaurus prestwicii. Originally Conmoria prestwicii, Camptosaurus prestwicii represents the only unquestioned Camptosaurus remains found outside North America. This species, found near Oxford, England, supports the idea that a land connection existed between North America and Europe during the late Jurassic period. This species is more primitive than Camptosaurus dispar. Campylodon. Invalid. See Campylodoniscus. Campylodoniscus ameginoi. This large four-legged browser, a sauropod, is known only from an incomplete upper jaw with a single tooth. Though mysterious, Campylodoniscus is especially interesting. It was one of the last surviving sauropods, a group that prospered in South America long after becoming rare in North America. Carcharodontosaurus zaharicus. This large carnivore is known from various remains, which include shark-like teeth, an incomplete skull, and torso bones. It seems to have been more advanced than the large primitive meat-eaters, the megalosaurids of the Jurassic period. This dinosaur's forelimbs were short and had very large claws. The upward-pointing spines on its back vertebrae were unusually high. The form of its teeth indicate that this dinosaur may not have sliced the flesh of its prey. Perhaps it ate smaller or softer animals than other predators did. This dinosaur may never be understood, as its remains were destroyed by bombing raids during World War II. Well, fortunately, we know a lot more about Carcharodontosaurus today. Since 1993, we've learned that it was an absolute monster, one of the largest allosaurs of all time, the apex predator of early Cretaceous Africa. It was very similar to the famous Giganotosaurus from South America. Evolutionary scientists regard Carcharodontosaurus and Giganotosaurus as distinct, but creationists are forced to see them both as subspecies of Allosaurus. Cardiodon rugulosus. This poorly known genus was founded on a single tooth collected in Wiltshire, England. The tooth is heart-shaped, hence the name of this large four-legged browser. It may be the same animal as Ceratosaurus, but the fossil evidence for Cardiodon is too meager for a definite link to be established. Carnotaurus sastri. One of the most unusual meat-eaters ever identified, bulldog-faced Carnotaurus had striking features. Its skull was quite large, though shorter and higher than that of later large predators such as Tyrannosaurus. Its snout was deep and narrow. The most remarkable aspect of this skull was the pair of prominent horns above the eyes. These horns projected out towards the sides and upward. We can only speculate about what they were used for. They were probably not weapons, since a carnivore of this size hardly needed such devices. Perhaps they were used for display purposes, or for intimidating another Carnotaurus. The eyes of this dinosaur were set so they could both focus, at least partially, on the same field of vision at the same time. Our own eyes focus in much the same way, giving us three-dimensional perspectives on the things we look at. The forelimbs of Carnotaurus were unusual. They were remarkably stubby, with especially short lower arm bones. Found with the skeleton were several fragments of fossilized skin impressions, a rare find among meat-eating dinosaurs. These fragments show that Carnotaurus skin was covered with small bony bumps that were separated from one another by areas of rough skin. Carnotaurus and the related Bellusaurus represent a unique line of carnivores found only in the southern hemisphere, with skull similarities to the Indian meat-eaters Indosaurus and Indotsuchus. Well, as you can see, a lot less was known about Bellusaurs in 1993. Cathetosaurus lewisi. The man who collected and named Cathetosaurus, the famous dinosaur Jim Jensen, believed it to be the only North American sauropod capable of rearing up on its hind legs. Jensen thought the vertebrae of Cathetosaurus had projections where strong ligaments may have attached. Those ligaments, he thought, would help Cathetosaurus rear up on its hind legs. The pelvis, too, according to Jensen, was unusually inclined, another perceived adaptation for bipedalism. Other scientists think that some of the features that make this genus unique are signs of old age. They argue that Cathetosaurus is really a species of Camarasaurus. Interestingly, the skeleton of Cathetosaurus shows deep teeth marks on a pelvic bone, and the front leg bones were displaced. These signs suggest that the carcass had been scavenged before burial, perhaps by a large theropod the size of Torvosaurus tanneri, a predator from the same time and place. The carcass was later turned over by the same or another meat-eater, which tore off the hind legs. Since the neck and rib cage were intact, the feast seems to have centered on the more heavily muscled pelvic to rear limb part of the body. Smaller teeth marks show that small scavengers also fed on the carcass, perhaps when the larger meat-eaters had finished, or between the larger animals' feeding periods, the little flesh-eaters ate what they could. Caudocellus. Doubtful. See Tyrannosaurus. Collodon. Doubtful. See Camarasaurus. Centrosaurus. Doubtful. See Eucentrosaurus. Ceratops montanus. Doubtful. See Chasmosaurus. Ceratops is a horned dinosaur of considerable size. It is known only from a pair of horn cores and a knob-like bone by which the skull attaches to its first neck vertebra. Ceratops was discovered in 1888, but it is still not well understood. It may be the remains of the better-known horned dinosaur Chasmosaurus, although there is not enough information to make a certain association. Interestingly, the remains of this dinosaur were found before horned dinosaurs were well known. Consequently, paleontologists believed this genus was more closely related to the plated dinosaur Stegosaurus. Ceratosaurus nasicornis. Ceratosaurus was a medium-sized meat-eating dinosaur with a horn above its eyes. The skull of Ceratosaurus was lightly built and was distinguished by a prominent nasal horn with a bony ridge. Just what does a large and frightening carnivore need with a nose horn? Most likely the horn was not used as a weapon. It may have been a sexual feature. It was delicately constructed and probably functioned only as a display. Or it may have helped young individuals hatch out of their eggs. The brain cavity indicates that Ceratosaurus' brain was long and thin, medium size for a meat-eater, and larger than the brains of plant-eating dinosaurs of the same size. Its eyes may have been large, affording it moderately good eyesight. Ceratosaurus' hands were equipped with 4 fingers, a primitive feature. Tyrannosaurus rex, the latest and most advanced large carnivore, had just 2 fingers. Ceratosaurus' body plan followed the basic shape of large theropods. Its tail was very long, comprising more than half the entire length of the animal. Its tail was thin, an indication to 19th century dinosaur scientist Othniel Charles Marsh, who named this dinosaur, that Ceratosaurus could swim by utilizing its tail. Ceratosaurus ingens. Doubtful name. This species, from Tendaguru, Tanzania, was first described as another species of the genus Megalosaurus. The flat-bladed teeth of this species are almost 15.5 centimeters long. It is too poorly known to identify positively. Ceratosaurus rochlingi. Doubtful name. This species is also from Tendaguru, but shows no distinctive characters that would single it out as anything other than some sort of theropod, not necessarily Ceratosaurus. Well, this takes us through all of the Bs, and then some. We have covered from Bactrosaurus through Ceratosaurus. Next time, we will cover from Cetiosauruscus through Deinocheirus. Thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed the Softly Spoken Science podcast. Good night.